It is exciting to be with HCI again. I presented sometime last year, and it was a great chance to interact with those of you on the webinar. I hope that today's topic will be relevant to everyone here. As Mark mentioned, the title is First Speak the Language, and how language is a foundation for a stronger global workforce. This is a topic that is becoming increasingly relevant as our companies become more global. I just wanted to introduce myself first. This is my family. This is my motivation behind everything that I do. You can see my wife and kids, and then our little dog, Reggie. For the last decade, my career has been focused on helping companies scale. And a big component of that has been international expansion. I was previously with a company called Jive Communications, and we were in hypergrowth mode. And as we were growing and scaling, we moved into several different countries: Guatemala, Mexico, Brazil, Canada. And then when our company was sold to LogMeIn, I joined a more global company. But I've learned a lot in my career about building global workforces and the importance of language in building those workforces. So that'll be, I'll share some of those stories and experience today. What's Immersion? Immersion is a company that's focused on impacting people's lives for the better, unlocking opportunities through them by helping them certify their language ability. To date, we've certified millions and millions of language speakers around the world in close to 1,000 companies, 150 different countries, and in many different languages. We've built the foremost digital language assessment tool in the world, used by many of the top companies in the world. And as companies are looking increasingly at a global workforce, what we provide is becoming increasingly relevant. So I'm excited to share more about how we're trying to help companies around the world. Next, I'm interested in meeting you. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about those who are on the webinar and some of the challenges that you're currently facing. So we're going to have our first poll, and the first poll question is this: I'm interested in your businesses. How many countries does your company currently do business in? And we'll talk about that for a little bit. So we can go to that first poll. Yeah, so the question is, how many countries are you currently doing business in? 1 to 10, 11 to 25, all the way up to over 100, or not sure. And again, to do this, you go, just go to the widget, and there's the Slido number, 746287. Give people just a second to get their results in. And if you want to start showing those results, that would be great, so we can see real time. Interesting. So a few attendees with companies that are in 26 to 50 countries. That's a massive operation with a lot of complexity, and even some in over 100 countries. Fascinating. Looks like the majority are in the 1 to 10 range. But an interesting spread, and some who aren't sure how many countries they're in. Awesome. So the next question builds on this. The next question is, in the next 5 years, how many additional countries do you estimate that your company may expand into? And again, it's hard to predict this, but interested in what you're seeing coming down the road for your business, and how the percentage will compare to the percentages in poll question number 1. So if we could show the results for that second question. How many additional countries do you think you'll expand into? And can you slide down just a little bit? Amazing. Some people planning to expand into 50 plus countries. That's super exciting. My guess is that if you're like a lot of the other companies that I'm talking to, this is a component of your future planning, international expansion. Not sure, a big group in not sure. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next poll. And this one deals with languages. In your current operations right now, how many different languages do you service? So this would be the languages that your people need to speak to be able to interact with customers. And there's options from 1 to 10, and then more than 10. So how many languages does your company currently service? And if you could show those results in real time, that'd be great. About 10% just in one, almost a third in multiple languages. Another 10% who speak 3 or more. Can you scroll down a little bit? Okay, there we go. How many are in 10 plus? If you scroll down just a little bit further. 21% in more than 10 languages. That's fascinating. And then the last question is building on this one. It's well, actually the last one is it gets to the point of this question of how are you certifying the language ability of those people that you're hiring? And we're suggesting there's 5 different options. There's probably more than this, but these are the most common ones that we see. So in the hiring process, how do you test the language ability of new hires? And if you could go over to that poll. Are you using a certified language tester? Are you doing it through interviews with your HR staff? Do you use a written test that you've developed internally? Do you use a third-party automated assessment? Or is there currently no process in place? And if you don't know what your process is, you can choose option number 5. We aren't currently testing for it. But let's see the results of what people are currently using. Okay. 70%, most people aren't testing for it. The 13% of a third-party automated assessment is close to what we see. We see 80 to 90% of companies aren't using a third-party assessment. Interesting to see these results from these global companies. Awesome. Thank you so much for taking part in that. That helps to orient me and helps us all to realize that we're dealing with a really diverse audience today, a lot of different needs. So let's talk for a few minutes about this challenge of certifying language ability and making sure that we hire people who speak the language. And I'm actually going to skip forward a few slides and start with a few stories. About a week and a half ago, I was at a senior HR executive roundtable, and the topic we were discussing was rising inflation that I assume we're all dealing with, and the impact on employee compensation that these rising inflationary costs are having. And it was very apparent that every company in that room is concerned, with consumer goods increasing and gas prices increasing and real estate rapidly increasing. How do we help our people to deal with inflation? And what are we going to do in our compensation strategy to deal with inflation? And very quickly, the conversation moved to international expansion. On this roundtable, we had small startups, small HR leaders from small startups in the room. We had medium-sized companies. We had public companies, large enterprises. And the fascinating thing was that every single one of the companies there was currently evaluating moving some of their human resource to offshore. because it was one of the only ways that they could see to keep rising costs under control. And that doesn't solve all the problems. Just moving offshore doesn't help us deal with the current pressures we have to pay our people domestically, but it's on people's minds. And HR leaders and other executives in the companies that we work in are trying to understand where can we find talent that isn't so expensive and that allows us to scale. We'll talk more about that and some of my experiences. I mentioned that when I was at Jive, we built a call center in Guatemala. We made our first hire there and quickly realized the amazing talent that was in the country of Guatemala. And so we rapidly began expanding our operation in Guatemala. And just in a period of a couple of years, we grew the call center to about 300 people. We had software engineers, project managers, customer service agents, onboarding specialists, a wide range of employees. And now that call center is about 700 people. But one of the challenges that we faced is that we had to keep the quality of our customer service very high. Jive was in the telecommunications space. And if any of you have dealt with customer service in telecommunications, it often doesn't have a great reputation. And so we saw an opportunity to differentiate our business based on our customer service. We felt that if we could create a premier customer service experience, that would not just be a cost center in our business, it would actually be part of the revenue generation of our business. And so it was a very strategic move for us. And what we quickly learned was that language ability and identifying language ability in the hiring process was critical. When one of our customers got on the phone with a customer service agent, the very first thing that they noticed was the ability for them to understand who they were talking to. And if we didn't get language ability right, it immediately started to impact our customer service scores and our customer satisfaction. The problem was we only had one person on staff that we completely trusted to evaluate that language ability. And that person was our head of operations, our head of HR, head of project management. He wore a ton of hats, but the quality was so critical that we had to run every hire through him to make sure that we maintain that quality. And that became a bottleneck and something that we had to resolve. We weren't aware of digital language assessment at the time. If we had been, we would have used it. And maybe just one more story to help illustrate some of the challenges that come with international expansion. We also expanded into Eastern Canada, and our people there spoke French as a primary language and English as a second language. And I remember one of our managers that we hired, fantastic employee, but didn't have the same language ability as some of her peers. And what we started to notice is that because of that lower language ability, the ability to speak English, she wasn't picking up on some of the nuance in conversations and wasn't able to communicate as clearly with her counterparts. And it not only created challenges for her, but for those around her and those that she led. And if we had had a better way to certify language ability in the hiring process, we probably still would have made the same hire, but we would have had a better understanding of how to fortify her language ability going forward. And we could tell a lot of other different stories of the impact of language on our current businesses and how it will be impacting our businesses in the future. But just wanted to start by illustrating some of those experiences that I've had. Going back a couple slides, language ability, as you look at international expansion, global expansion, it is foundational for our companies to be able to grow. It facilitates the flexible and remote workplaces that so many of us are a part of. It's part of the digital transformation. It's key in building a global workforce, making sure that our employees, wherever they are, can interact with each other and can support customers. It also becomes a component of promotion and progress tracking, talent management. We'll get into that a little bit later. And one of the most exciting components of language ability is diversity, equity, and inclusion. As our companies become more global, the opportunity for increased diversity and inclusion goes up. In the last few hires that we've made at Immersion, we've done a national and an international search. And we have just been blown away by the global talent that has applied for our positions. And it just unlocks such an exciting next wave of growth for all of our business as we look to expand globally. And our people can better reflect the customers that we serve if we're able to hire internationally. If you don't get language ability right, if we don't get language ability right, it impacts our ability to grow and win new customers. And we talked a little bit about customer service scores and customer satisfaction, which leads to issues with customer retention, which impacts the bottom line. If you don't get language ability correct, it also impacts employee turnover, and specifically 90-day employee turnover, because that's the time when employees are consuming massive amounts of information and trying to get onboarded. And if language is an impediment, we see that show up in 90-day retention scores. And then we talked a little bit about. Could you say that again? We talked a little bit about internal communication problems. For our teams to function smoothly, language is such a critical component. So with all this talk about rating language ability, certifying language ability, how do you do it well? How do you identify solid language speakers? I wanted to do an activity and give each of us here the chance to have a go at this and see how well we can rate language ability. So here's what we're going to do. This will be interactive. I'm going to play an audio clip. This is of an actual person who has taken an immersion certification test. We'll let you listen to it for a few seconds and then give you a chance for you to rate that person's English ability on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being not fluent and 10 being fully fluent. And then we'll see how those scores come through. So if you're ready, let's jump into this first example. This is Sandra. We've changed the name, and just listen to this audio clip for a second, and then we'll give you a chance to rate her fluency. Here's Sandra.
Okay, for the next weekend, I think I'm gonna go to Moab because I really like that park. So I'm planning to go with my friends over there. I don't know like yet like when we're gonna go, but I'm pretty sure that we're gonna go. So I'm so excited about it, and I have never been there, so I'm much excited about it. And I think I'm gonna. Oh yeah, I forget.
Okay, there's Sandra. We'll stop it there. I think that's enough. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and you can imagine yourself being in an interview with Sandra, and you're trying to evaluate her language ability, where would you rate that on a scale of 1 to 10 for fluency? So if we can go over to that poll and give everyone a chance to share their opinion. Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being fluent. We'll give people just a few seconds to respond, and then we'll start showing the results. And you can start to ask yourself, what kind of a role would Sandra be qualified for in your company? Would you put her in front of customers or not? Would that language ability be okay for interacting with employees internally? So if you want to show those results, let's see how people are rating her speaking ability. Broad range, and this is what I expected. Several around the middle, 60%, just about in the 4 to 6 range. Some people, maybe one person rated as a 10, some as low as a 2. average of 5.8 so far. This is really common unless you are a certified language tester and you do this a lot. It's really hard to evaluate someone's language ability. And we find this all the time, that people who are doing the evaluations are often recruiting coordinators or recruiters, and then it goes to the manager. And in a global workforce, usually the people who are doing the language certification speak particularly if it's English, they're speaking English as a second language themselves. And it becomes hard to give an unbiased and an effective rating for language. So when we put her through the immersion test, this is how Sandra scored. She scored she scored a 6.0. So in our language certification test, there's actually a 100-point scale. It's very detailed, and it aligns with CFR. So, for example, a 6.0 on our test would be about a B1, which is an upper intermediate. The challenge with CFR is a B1 is a very broad range. And you could have a B1 who speaks significantly better than Sandra, or a B1 who speaks significantly worse, but they're all rated as a B1. And so having a 100-point scale and being able to calibrate that scale becomes very helpful in evaluating language talent. So we're going to do another one. So that's Sandra. Interesting that the average score was very close to a 6.0. And we'll try one more. This is Rashida, and we're going to do the same thing. We'll listen to a few seconds of her clip. And again, imagine that you're sitting across from Rashida in an interview. You're trying to evaluate her language ability and trying to consider, would she be qualified for this role? Let's say it's a customer service role. Would you put her in front of customers, or would you consider her for a different role in the company based on her language ability? So let's listen to Rashida, and then you can rate her language.
Next weekend, I'll be in Chicago with my sister and our best friend Sam. He is from Mexico, and we will be celebrating Thanksgiving together. We still don't have any specific plans for next weekend, but I think since it will be Black Friday, we'll be getting some Christmas gifts for our families, for mom, dad, my brother, and also I'll have to get a gift for my sister and for.
Okay, that's enough. We'll end there. So let's go through the same exercise. Please take a second and respond to the poll and rate Rashida's English on a scale of 1 to 10. All right, you can show the results. Significantly higher. Yep, people spread around the 8 and the 9, average of 8.3. You could tell immediately that her English ability was significantly stronger. Score of 8.8, 8.9. Fantastic. Thanks so much for your participation. Again, it's interesting to see, and I didn't help you a lot. I didn't give you, a very specific rating scale. It was very broad, but still interesting to see the variation in how people rate language ability. In our results, when Rashida took the immersion test, she scored an 8.5, significantly higher than Sandra. This would be a C1 on the CFR scale, which is advanced. But again, based on that language ability, what roles would she be qualified for in your organization, and what opportunities could you unlock for her based on that language ability? As you think a little bit more about your opportunities to expand globally and hiring global talent and testing for language, some of the things that we have found as you compare human raters to automated testing, and this applies much more broadly than just language assessment. This is This could apply to cognitive assessments or specific job-specific assessments. There are many advantages to introducing artificial intelligence and assessments into your hiring process. Our philosophy is that automation and artificial intelligence shouldn't replace humans, but it should provide better data for the hiring process so that you can identify the skills and abilities that you need to bring the right people into your organization. As mentioned, human raters, if they're evaluating language, it can take 30 to 60 minutes in an interview, whereas a digital assessment could be done in 10 to 15 minutes. And down to point 4, the fourth bullet point, instead of assessing language ability one-on-one with a human, you can test hundreds or thousands of candidates simultaneously. As I mentioned, we've been doing global searches for talent for some of the roles we're hiring for, and we're getting 400 to 500 applicants for some of these roles. And if there isn't a way to quickly evaluate who is the most qualified for the role, then the process of screening can become extremely burdensome. And so a verified artificial intelligence assessment can really help in the screening process. It's objective. It removes much of the human bias and error. You get more consistent results, and the cost is significantly less. Instead of having to scale up your recruiting team to have enough people to sift through the resumes and to meet with the candidates, you can do much of the screening through assessments. So if you're not currently considering assessments in your hiring process, I'd encourage you to do so. Whether it's language or anything else, these can be extremely helpful in getting better data for your hiring. So we, to close in the last few minutes, I just want to share some of the best practices that we see as we work with some of the top companies in the world in what they're doing to try to certify language ability and try to find the best talent for their organizations. And the first thing is, best companies, they screen first. Language ability, again, if you're looking to hire bilingual or multilingual speakers, language ability is a top predictor for many other abilities in the role. If you can speak the language well, you can have better team dynamics. You can onboard more quickly. You can interact with customers more effectively, which will lead to higher CSAT scores. And so putting language ability, screening for language ability at the top of your hiring funnel can streamline everything else. And it can remove pressure from your recruiters, from your hiring managers, from everyone else downstream. So we see that the best companies are screening at the top of funnel to identify the top candidates lower in the funnel. Another thing that this does and that top companies do is they're constantly looking for ways to eliminate unnecessary interviews. If you can screen for the most specific talents and abilities and skills that you need to hire for, your cost savings can be significant. And I'm not telling you anything new, but one of the challenges is, how do you find the right assessment to prove someone's ability? And what we've found is that language is a fantastic, like I said, it's a fantastic predictor for other abilities in the organization. And top companies are hiring 2 times faster. The candidates are 95% more accurate in matching the candidate to the role. They're getting better objectivity, and they're seeing much more scalable processes as they introduce AI into the hiring process. The other interesting thing that you get with better data in your hiring process is you can customize thresholds for each role. So as we showed with the language assessment there, every candidate who completed the immersion assessment had a score. And over time, as you have several candidates go through the hiring process and you see who the top performers are and who the less than top performers are, you can create thresholds and get smarter and smarter in your hiring process. And again, you can do this with other assessments as well. But in the HR function, the more data that we can have in educating our decisions, the better talent decisions we're going to make. And so best companies are creating thresholds for the different roles that they're hiring for. And once you have thresholds in place and once you have better data, you can place your hires correctly. You can put new hires in the roles that they're best suited for. You know, someone like Sandra, where her English ability wasn't on par with maybe what we would need to put in front of customers. There may be other roles that she would be perfectly qualified for, and then we could help her develop her English ability. But knowing how close she is to the threshold might help you to still make a good hire of Sandra, but prep her over the next 6 months to 12 months to move into a different role. There's all kinds of implications for how you can place your hires if you have better data. Best companies are certifying periodically. Language ability is a very fluid thing. And as you test bilingual and multilingual speakers through their employee journey, you can find additional insights and additional learnings that can help you develop that individual, which leads to the next point. There are some roles that we see in companies where employees have to have a certain language score to be able to interact with certain customers. So, for example, one of our customers, they require an 8.2 on the Immersion scale. And if someone is at a 7.7 or a 7.8, you can put that goal in front of them and help them strategically learn the language better so that they can move into that higher paying job. And so that ongoing certification process helps you with your talent management. It helps you with employee development, it helps you with promotions, helps you to create a fantastic work environment for your people because they're learning and growing. And so those are some of the implications of certifying as you go to make sure that you're promoting your people. And the other thing that we see top companies doing is they are charging a premium for better language talent. When we were at Jive, there were certain customers that we would only put certain employees on. And these employees had to be the best language speakers and have the best skills, the best technical skills. And as we put those employees on those higher revenue generating customers, the fees that we could charge were higher. We could do managed services with some of those employees, and there were other ways to increase our revenue. But it was based in large part on the language ability of that employee, in addition to the technical skills. So as an HR organization, the better data you have, the more value you can offer to the operations of the business to increase revenue and to create a better customer experience. And whenever the HR function is functioning in that type of a role of being strategic and helping the company to grow, we become more and more valuable to the overall organization. I'll give everyone just a second to breathe because I'm going through these pretty quickly. But standardizing quality, as we saw some of the survey results of companies who are in 10 to 20 companies or 30 or 100 plus countries, one of the questions is how do you maintain your quality standards when you're operating in so many different global locations? And one of the key ways is to have an objective standard that you're grading all hires against, so that your customer service, whether they interact with someone in the Philippines or Africa or Latin or South America, the quality is the same. I had a basketball coach who loved McDonald's quarter pounders, And we were always teasing him about why he loved McDonald's Quarter Pounder so much, because there were so many different hamburger joints that had way better burgers than McDonald's. But his answer was, a McDonald's Quarter Pounder is a McDonald's Quarter Pounder. No matter where I go, I know I'm going to get the same Quarter Pounder. And to the extent that we can, that's the experience we want for our customers, is when they interact with our people, wherever they are, that they can get the quality of interaction that they expect. Finally, all of this leads into better business metrics. Solid language skills improve business outcomes. We find that they lead to 20% higher CSAT scores and better employee retention. The longer you can retain your employees, the better experience you can create for your customers. And all of this leads to company growth. And so as you think about how to lead your organizations through this digital transformation and this global transformation, and becoming much more global organizations, hopefully you can see the impact that language can have, not just on the hiring process and the recruiting process, but on the overall business outcomes. And that's really my conclusion. I love some of the trends that we're experiencing right now. I love seeing the results from those surveys of seeing how your companies are looking to expand and become more global. I love the implications for DE&I. I'm a globally minded person, and every chance we get to hire someone who's of a different culture and a different background, I feel like it makes our company better and provides better service for our customers. And if I can be of any help to you in your efforts to expand globally, and as you have questions about language certification or introducing artificial intelligence into the hiring process, I hope you'll feel comfortable reaching out to me, and I'd love to be a resource and help for you. If you're interested in trying an immersion test for free, you can hit this QR code. It's actually a really fun process. I speak German as a second language, and it was really exciting to be able to test my German ability and see how much I've digressed over the last 20 years since learning it, and see what I've retained. If you don't speak a second language, feel free to take the test in your native language, and you can get a feel for how the assessment works and what kind of a candidate experience it would be if you tried this. We have a free trial. So if you're unsure about introducing language assessment into your process, just start a free trial. We'll give you several assessments in the languages that you need, and you can start trying it on candidates, or you can start trying it internally with some of your people. One thing that a lot of companies like to do to create a threshold is they'll identify a group of their best language speakers, their best performers, and give the assessment to them and get the score there. They'll assess some of their medium performers and some of their lower performers. And that will give a baseline to base hiring decisions off of in the interview process. So feel free to start a trial and give it a whirl, and then reach out if you have follow-up questions as you try to implement this. And with that, Mark, I think we can move into Q&A if there are any questions that have come up.
Yes, thanks, Paul, for that great presentation. English is my only language, and I hope I'm approaching fluency, but I do have a few questions for you, all in English. The first is, it seems that artificial intelligence is all about replacing humans. Is that what you feel is the expectation with using tools like this?
No, absolutely not. We are not trying to replace humans. But what we are trying to do is take some of the tasks that can be automated so that you can divert your human talent to higher value tasks. And what we found is that humans are actually not very good at assessing language ability in a consistent and predictable way. there's so many different biases that come into the process that even some of our customers who previously had certified language testers, this is what they did all day long, every day. There were massive amounts of variability in the language certification, and getting a more consistent standard is really helpful. And then you can take your people and put them on tasks that are more strategic for the business than just certifying language ability. Good question.
Great, thanks. Matt asks if you're seeing more of a trend to have executives speak more than just English.
I certainly am. And that was because, and I'm harkening back to my days at LogMeIn, we were doing business in 20 to 25 countries, and more executives were speaking multiple language because we were hiring more executives internationally. I don't see a huge trend of executives in the United States learning second languages. And maybe that's just a comment on our culture here. But as operations for businesses are expanding more globally, more executives are being hired elsewhere. I don't know if that answered the question for Matt, but that's what I'm seeing from my perspective.
SE Brick asks, are you seeing assessments being leveraged in specific industries or disciplines?
Absolutely. We deal a lot in the call center BPO outsourcing space, and assessments are a major factor in hiring in that space. Part of it is because of the volume. We have some customers who are hiring thousands of agents a month. So you can imagine the screening load for the recruiting teams to get through all of those candidates. So in that industry, assessments are absolutely a key part of the hiring process. In software engineering, especially companies who are hiring software engineers at scale, assessments are playing a bigger role. Coding assessments, different skill assessments. I think even in the accounting world, the finance world, Excel assessments, making sure that people have the basic typing and Excel skills, they're certainly used there. But what we saw with COVID, where no longer were people coming to meet in person for interviews, they were being done digitally. The assessment space is a very hot space right now in HR, and more companies are adopting assessments and artificial intelligence to try to get better data in the hiring process. So yeah, if your company isn't currently evaluating assessments, certainly something to start considering.
And Tanya asks, does your company assess English to another language fluency? For example, Spanish. I guess English to Spanish fluency.
Yeah. Whatever language you want to test for, out of the 9 languages that we currently have, and we're constantly adding more languages to the platform, you can test for that. So if Spanish is the mother language and you want to test English, you can certainly test the English ability against a consistent standard.
And Paul, how frequently do you recommend assessing the language ability of employees?
That's a really good question, and it's going to differ for every group. We have one customer who assesses candidates before they are hired, and then a couple months after hiring, and then every 3 or 4 months thereafter. We have some language learning customers who offer the assessment as often as language learners would like to take it. That could be every 60 days. And then we have other customers who do it every 6 months to 12 months. But what they're trying to do is align the data that they're getting from the assessment with their strategy. So if they have a talent management strategy of looking to promote people internally, then they may line that up with annual reviews or semi-annual reviews. So a lot of different use cases, and it really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish with the data that you get from the assessment.
Great, thank you. And what are your recommendations for getting upper leadership on board with budget approval for a tool like this?
That's another great question. There are a lot of different ways to show ROI. One of them is in the, I always like to start big picture. As an HR professional, I consider myself a business leader before I'm an HR leader. And so I'm interested in, how do we increase revenue for the business? How do we increase customer retention? And how do we increase employee retention? Because that's a major cost. And so I always try to start high level. And what we see is that if you can hire better language talent, then it has a direct impact on your bottom line. It helps you retain customers better. It actually helps you win customers better. We have some of our customers who, they actually sell, as they're talking to potential customers that they're selling to in their call centers, they say, we have certified language talent for every single hire that we make. And this language talent is top in the industry. And so they're actually using language certification as a way to grow top line revenue. But there's also savings on the recruiter side. You don't need to hire as many screeners and recruiting coordinators, because so much of that work can be done through the tool. If you have a big contract where you have to hire hundreds of new agents, you don't have to scale up your staff as quickly, because you can do the screening through artificial intelligence. Several other ways to justify it as well, but we'd be happy to have that conversation with you in how to show value to executives and leaders in the business, because it's definitely there.
So to get leadership on board, to continue the theme, speak their language, right?
That's right. Yeah, you need to get into their minds of what's keeping them up at night, and that's usually, how do I grow the business, and how do I keep my customers happy and my employees happy?
So the language for executives is ROI, generate revenue, cut costs.
Yeah. Yep, I think so.
Last question. You had mentioned that you use a 100-point scale a couple of times. Yeah. Why is that so important?
It's important because it gives you granularity. Again, I talked about the CFR scale, and I don't know how many people are familiar with CFR. It's kind of the standard scale in the industry. But if you have a B1 speaker, there's a broad range that all falls into the language ability of a B1. But if I can tell you this is a 6.6 or a 6.7, that's much more granular, and you can set your thresholds to on a much more granular level. And it goes back to quality. You know, what's the quality that you're trying to give, and the consistency you're trying to give internally and externally. And so having that 100-point scale just allows you to pinpoint the language ability of your language speakers.
Great answer. Thanks so much, Paul, for a great presentation.